Hey guys, Matt Bell here with another episode of Improv for Violinists. I realize that we missed a week, but there was this whole Hurricane Florence thing that was headed toward North Carolina where I live, and I had a little bit of business to handle in order to get ready for that hurricane, so I missed a week of doing these videos. We're fine. It was basically a non-event where I live. Thank you to everybody who reached out to ask about it. I really did get a lot of people that were asking, hey, are you okay? Yeah, we were great. It really, it was rainy and windy, and that was about it for us. So thank you. I do want to pull back a little bit this week. We've been getting real nitty-gritty about sort of some real lick-oriented stuff, and I will get back to that. I'm a real lick dude. I love all that stuff. But I want to pull back and talk about the elements of what makes a good solo. How is a good solo constructed? So first, the question itself implies that there is something intentional about the entire solo. It's not just a random collection of licks sort of strung together chasing chords around. And that is true, just like a good book is not just a collection of random thoughts with a cover slapped on it, okay? A lot of people have written and talked about the elements of a good solo. I personally sort of break it down into 4 sections. There's the intro, how we get into the solo. There's the build, and that's going to be a lot of the solo. We're sort of building toward 3, the payoff. And then 4, once we have reached that payoff, how do we get out of this and sort of set ourselves up for another run on this cycle of chords that we're messing with, or getting back into vocals, or getting ready to hand it to another soloist, and all those, there's different ways to go about all that, okay? This week, I want to talk about the intro. We'll get to those other sections in coming weeks, okay? So there are several options on how to get into your solo, and which one you pick sort of has a lot, it depends on a lot of things. To use a football analogy, we talk about down and distance. You have to know what the down is, what the distance is, what the clock says, what the score of the game. There's a lot of situational sort of things that help us decide how we're going to get into a solo. It might be the style of tune that we're playing. Where are we in the night? Where am I as a player? What's my general mood? I mean, there's a lot of different factors that will decide how I'm going to get into a solo. As usual, there are multiple right answers and multiple wrong answers. I guess we really should mention that in art, right and wrong are sort of interesting terms, right? There certainly are choices that are more or less advisable than others, okay? So if you're going to play a solo, you want people to listen to you, right? I mean, that's the whole point playing solo. I've got something musical to say. Ideally, I'm going to have a listener who wants to hear it. So let's make them want to hear it. The intro to your solo should be an attention grabber, okay? So there's a few different ways to do this musically. One way, and it's a common way, is to explode into the solo. And what exactly do I mean by that? It could be a flurry of notes. It could be a huge slide. It could be a giant crunch. It could be the sidestep lick that just hangs out outside the chord a little too long. In other words, it's a way to snap people's heads towards you as a soloist. I've got a project I'm working on right now where I'm coming into a solo. You're gonna hear me sort of talking in the background and getting ready. Let's do a couple of intros to a solo where we're exploding into this thing, okay?
That's right now.
Okay, that's sort of a flurry of notes approach, right? Let's try that sidestep lick thing we were talking about. We're going to sidestep for a while. Okay, so it's we're in G, and I did sort of like a D sharp type thing. Yeah, not my friend D sharp, but anyway, the key. There is we can do a big slide, right? Right? Just anything to really sort of explode and grab people's attention right now. Hey, I'm taking a solo. You should listen to me. Okay? I think you can guess when that would work. If we got a real up-tempo tune and it's, you know, the night's just got a lot of energy in it and it just feels like, you know what? I'm going to play something for y'all. Y'all sit back and listen to this. Here we go. Okay. Let's talk about a situation where maybe it would not work. If we're in a ballad, probably don't want to explode into a solo in a ballad. It would work better if maybe it's not the first song of the night and you're not quite warmed up yet and you're ready to just throw this flurry of notes out there. As a more practical consideration, you might want to take a look at the guy who's running front of house. If you've got a front of house engineer out there and he seems more interested in talking to the people next to him than he does in running sound, I know it happens. And you're not sure that you're really up that far in the mix, and you're pretty sure he's not going to turn you up just because you started taking a solo, maybe exploding into the solo is not the best idea because nobody's going to hear it, okay? And it just sort of, it's going to make whatever comes next sort of sound a little out of context when he finally, oh gosh, I should turn the fiddle player up. So that's one thing to think about. You're just going to have to sort of assess the situation, okay? Obviously, if it's early in the evening, you're not warmed up, you want to play something really intricate because you want people to anticipate the rest of the solo and not because they're afraid you're going to play something even worse. If you're not warmed up and you're not ready to rip those notes out, hang back a little bit, okay? So another way to start a solo besides exploding into it might be with a really brief lick followed by silence for a minute, okay? You might throw one phrase out and then let a change or two go by without playing at all. It's a little awkward and it creates tension, but that's good. We like tension. It gives us something to release. Let's give an example of that.
That's right, now.
Here we go. Right? So that's a way that I've sort of announced with the first little lick, hey, this is my solo. And I'm just going to let it breathe a little bit, okay? One of my favorite ways to start a solo is with a long note, okay? And I will typically bend it to create some interest, some tension release. When in doubt, pick a chord tone. B.B. King made a whole career out of defaulting to the root. It's never a bad choice, okay? Let's try that. This is in G.
That's right, now.
Okay, so that's how I might get into that solo, just a long note. I like the 5, I like the 7, I like the 9. They're all good choices. A double stop with a flat 7 and a 9 is often a really interesting choice. So we're in G, so, right? So that's the 9 and the flat 7. Let's see how that sounds.
That's right, now.
Okay, so that might be a good way to get in. It's cool, man. The 9 and the flat 7, they just sound good together, right? Especially if you got a 5 chord coming. In this case, it's not. It goes G to F, G to F. But anyway, flat 7 and 9 makes a really interesting double stop to start a solo with. Okay. Another common way is to quote the tune that you're playing. Okay, and then you can do sort of variations on a theme. It's really Bach-esque. Let's try that. This is the intro lick I'm using. So if you've listened to the tune, and this is an arrangement of, it's a remake that I'm doing. So you haven't heard that lick before, but the person who's sitting through this in a live setting would have heard that lick before. They would have heard it at the entrance of the tune. Hey, that's the head, right? He just quoted this tune. And then that allows me, it gives me a safe place to start my solo because I know it works over the chord changes. I've played it over those changes before, like 2 minutes ago. And then it allows me to sort of do a variations on a theme thing after that. It's an excellent structure for a solo, and it really takes a lot of pressure off of you. Instead of having like way too many options, you're like, I'll just quote the head and then I'll sort of work from there, okay? you don't have to quote the tune. You could come up with your own little melody and start that. Let's just come up with right on the spot here. Right? So see, I sort of came up with a really quick little lick and then started improvising on that lick. So the intro to my solo would be just a really simple lick. And then it sort of helps me figure out where I'm going to go from there. Okay? As we're talking about these ideas, are you getting some of your own? You starting to, oh, yeah. Good. That's the whole point. Being intentional about how you start your solos is not a bad thing. In fact, I will often go into a solo without a complete game plan, but I'll usually have an idea of how I'm going to start it and then sort of take what comes to me. Okay, some of my very best solos have pretty much written themselves, but they all have a strong start. And as I'm getting ready to come in, okay, I know I've got this solo, he's just pointed at me. You want to have some idea of how I'm going to start this solo. And so there's some methods that you can fall back on. I may not use the same lick every time. I hope I don't use the same lick every time. That would get really boring. But there are a couple of stock methods that we've talked about here that will give you an idea of how to start a solo. Okay, so this week's homework is to start a bunch of solos. Okay, maybe pick a tune that you play a lot and practice just getting in. What you've heard here is like the first 10% or 15% of this solo in this tune. Don't try to get all the way through the solo. Just get started and get into it. And practice doing that 100 times, okay? The way you get better at stuff is by doing it and then being critical of yourself, okay? So pick a couple different ideas, pick an idea, and then pick a couple different implementations of that idea. Okay, I'm going to explode into this solo. I'm going to make a real statement. Okay, let me try maybe 10 or 15 different ways to explode in this solo, right? And then maybe I'll come up with 10 or 15 different ways to maybe play a lick and then wait. Okay, so videotape, God, how old am I? Set up your cell phone camera like I've got right now and record yourself starting these solos. You would be amazed how different it sounds when you listen back than it does when you're playing it, okay? It's going to really, your sense of timing is totally jacked when you're playing the violin. When you're listening back, you're going to notice a lot of timing things that you didn't notice when you were playing. So that's going to help you, okay? Yeah, just experiment and mess around. So we'll see you next week. Practice, have fun, play. Start some solos. Come up with sort of maybe your own little concept for starting solos. Don't make it too specific so that all your solos start the same, but maybe have a concept of how I could start a solo or several different concepts and then work out some different implementations of that. Okay? I'll see you next week.